Hey everybody, this is going to be a fun stream. I've got Philip and Nathan, and Cringe should be turning up at some point. And the concept here is for the next year's Lamster, I want to put on a live audio play. I'm going to cast it, write it, maybe even I've potentially even got Chris Gard might do some music for us. That's the end goal, but this is just an initial conversation to flesh out some ideas, and the only steering kind of direction that I've got at the minute is let's take everything that's really great and works from The Matrix. And The Matrix, of course, is a very meme-worthy film, which has, I think, endured in our minds because it's actually a very interesting exploration of some ideas, and works on a number of levels. So I don't want to do a really close remake of The Matrix so much as just use that as a creative spark, twist some things around and see where we end up. I don't know where we're going to go with this. But are you're both up for that? You're both you've got your creative juices flowing.
Can we get Keanu Reeves to reprise the role?
Keanu Reeves, I cannot confirm or deny, has agreed to be on Lamster next year. So, but I'm not sure what he thinks of the direction that the Wachowski siblings have gone with their franchise.
I mean, he came back for the fourth one, right? He did the fourth one.
He did
recently.
come back. He agreed. Yeah, true. So I always thought that the whole of the setup up to the famous scene with the red pill, blue pills business was magnificent, and then it sort of goes in a slightly disappointing direction partly after that. But why don't we start by talking about what do we think is great and works, and we want to either keep or consider emulating in some way. What do you guys think of the movie? Maybe I should start with that. What do you think of The Matrix, and what do you think is its best aspects as a movie?
Well, I really love the movie. A couple of years, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago, they did a re-release of it in the cinemas. I think it was 20 years since it had come out, and I went along to it, and it was an amazing experience seeing it in a theatre. It was really made for the big screen, and the digital effects still held up quite well.
Wow.
Too, but sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I don't think I've got the budget to do digital special effects, sadly. But I'll write that down anyway. I'll tell you what. Let's get a document going. I'm to do special effects.
Can you put Keanu Reeves in there?
Yeah, Keanu Reeves.
I mean, I might be able to do some artworks to accompany if it's an audio. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's taking on too much, but might be something.
Or maybe Philip. One or the other. They're pretty interchangeable. I think Hollywood would consider your input to be equivalent to ILM at this point.
Yeah, definitely magic.
Okay,
I guess
more seriously,
to your question, I guess the thing that's really compelling about the Matrix, the kind of fundamental setup, this world which people within it know that, or have a sense there's something not quite right. Neo works this office job 9 to 5, but he's not content with it, and he's trying to find out what the truth is. Goes through the kind of clubbing scene, but that in itself isn't necessarily the truth either. Clubbing and drugs and so on. But through that, he discovers that it's actually all of this is wrong. It's a simulation, and that this isn't the real world. Actually, this is an exploitation of human beings, and I guess by the machines. And there's not a too subtle comparison, I guess, between being an office drone and being a battery for machines. I think the visual language the film uses makes that comparison quite strong. So that idea of, and I guess it's connected to Plato's Republic and Descartes' Meditations, that the world we experience isn't the real world. It's actually all a lie to keep us controlled. And so discovering what that real world is and breaking free of the illusion, I think that's the thing that is so compelling about the story, especially as set in a, like, updated into a technological age as well. So we can kind of relate or understand some of the mechanics behind it too. Mm-hmm.
Do you just so we can make sure everyone's on the same page, do you want to explain about Descartes and Plato?
I'll do my best. Plato, Greek philosopher, wrote a famous book called The Republic, which is essentially his ideas about how human life should be lived and how society should be structured. And within that, he has several allegories about the nature of reality. And one of these is Plato's cave, or the allegory of the cave, wherein there is a group of people who are chained by the neck and are forced to look at a wall. And on that wall are the shadows of objects which are processing in front of a fire. These people think that the shadows are the sum total of reality. They don't know any better. And some of them become experts. Others, will police those who kind of had doubts or any questions. But eventually, one of the prisoners is freed. We're not sure by who, but they're freed. And they turn around and they see the fire behind them. And eventually they lead out of the cave and experience the real world and all of the objects within it. And this for Plato is an allegory of the nature of reality. The world of appearances for him is illusory. The physical world is illusory in some sense and is a shadow reflection of what he would call, let's just say, the transcendent, the forms, the transcendent. Descartes' idea isn't quite the same. He's not really talking about reality as such. It's more a thought experiment that he's trying to see if there's any belief that we can have absolute certainty in. So he creates this hypothetical situation. Imagine there is an evil demon who has kind of implanted thoughts in your mind. He's created all the things that you experience. This is a possible thing, right? It's not impossible. Therefore, we can doubt all of our beliefs about what we experience and so on. And you keep doing that with all of your beliefs. Is it possible a demon's tricked me into believing this? Until he reaches the point where he says, well, I know that I am thinking. That's something that the demon can't have tricked me into, because even just to think that is a thought. So I guess, just what you're writing. The evil demon idea is that the senses might be misleading, that the way we think about the world is all an illusion. We can have that doubt, and if the possibility of doubt is there, how can we actually know if it is the case? That's what Descartes is trying to get us to think about.
It was actually this Descartes, the Cartesian perspective, that was completely dominating my first reaction when I saw The Matrix. Originally, was it over a decade ago that it came out? Approaching 20 years ago, even.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes, and I think that this is making a kind of philosophical point. The more like political point is the thing that has captured everybody's minds more recently with the red pill, blue pill stuff, right? The kind of it's more like an Orwellian, you're society is dystopian and you need to figure out who's really behind it, that kind of perspective. But I'd quite like to end with a product that has both of those aspects. Maybe I'll put political here as a separate thing. Yeah.
One thing that I like about The Matrix is this kind of parallel between Mr. Anderson living, doing his 9 to 5 job in the apartment. That's kind of in the same direction as you were saying, Nathan. That he is actually, or this job, this, what do you call it, office job, and him doing that, and everyone else in the whole building, it's like a skyscraper.
What a student thing to say.
Yeah, office
job.
People doing jobs. I mean, anyway, no, I've got a part-time job, so I can sympathize.
Fair.
Yeah, but he's literally acting as part of a giant battery, like this big skyscraper in which he's working among many others. He's kind of spending his life energy to fuel some big machine, and then when that's revealed as being literally true outside of the Matrix, there's this interesting perspective that one gets on one's own reality. So it's almost as though there's an apocalypse that takes place. There isn't really a different reality that he's exploring. They're the same reality. It's just that he is looking at them through renewed eyes. And I think that's why there's also a strong parallel between baptism and Neo's emergence into the real world, I guess, when he gets unplugged and he finds himself in this bathtub. So I think we need a full body immersion, and when he wakes up, he has to be a little baby. That's.
I'll put a category here for theological illusion. Is illusion a word? I think it's the right word.
Yeah.
So you're saying that baptism. I also remember there being a scene of where what was the game that was exploring Ayn Rand? And there was a scene in that game where you went through a kind of baptism. Somebody in chat will remember and remind me what I'm thinking of here. Anyway, baptism. So you're saying,
is it Bioshock?
Well, I suppose it's kind of it's Bioshock. Thank you. Yeah. Baptism. I guess the link in some ways is that in both cases it's kind of like a birth, and I suppose there's a rebirth aspect to the imagery of baptism, and there's a birth. I think unavoidably in the imagery when Neo wakes up in his little pod where he's kind of, in liquid and he's got a tube, that is clearly natal imagery in my mind. So /birth. I reckon we have to have some. I think I don't know how close it's going to be to the original Matrix concept, but I do think we're going to have a decision by the protagonist of whether or not to wake up to the true nature of the world. And in some ways, the thing that I want to maybe twist more on is what is the true nature of the world. So at the beginning of the film, we have a more recognizably normal environment, which as the viewer, you feel like that could be me in my everyday life, but I've always felt like something is wrong. I'm going to put that as a what works. I've always felt something is wrong. So playing on that kind of instinct that a lot of people have, and then providing this like quite fantastical answer to the question. But the fantastical answer is kind of a heightened reality. It's an exaggeration of something that the filmmakers are sort of saying is true, or whether they mean it that way or not. I think that's how you as a viewer take it. That it's like how a zombie film plays on your real world worries about a mind virus. You know, The Matrix plays on your real world fears that there's some really important element of reality that you know, there's something different going on to what you're being told, and if you could figure it out, then you would be doing something about it. But because you don't know, you're kind of grasping at straws. So I think that's my theory is that we can take The Matrix almost like a genre, like in the same way as zombie films. You can make lots of different zombie films, and they can have lots of differences to each other. I want to take the core concept of a discover what's true about reality type film, but use it as a vessel a little bit to our own observations about reality, maybe.
I think that's a really great point, and I'd like to drop like maybe a little teaser for something we can discuss later, because I think one of the things I was thinking about is that The Matrix primarily focuses upon, let's just say, the material world. So it's, you wake up from a simulation of the material world. Your senses, it's a sensory thing. But in reality, Neo never really has to change how he thinks or feels about the world. He just remains largely the same in his dispositions. But it struck me that, this sense of truth that we're talking about, well, we believe that there is something more than just worshipping and serving created things. It's believing in God and having communion with Christ. But you might even go for, you don't need to necessarily even go that route. It strikes me that if all your values and beliefs come from a world based on a simulation, surely they would be forced to change with a new world that you're living in. And when you look at Zion, which I know is not in the first film, but is in the later films, it's basically like a 90s liberals multicultural ideal city where everybody has a rave, to celebrate. It's just like the world he's come from, but a more perfect version of it. But it's not fundamentally different in any way. So they're just recreating the world they've already left. It's just not a simulation. But to me, that's a weak kind of alternative. And I think you're kind of hitting on that. The Matrix films get right the sense of something's wrong here, but let's say the positive vision is completely missing. What's that thing that Neo's actually trying to find? What's he searching for? That's the weakest part of the film to me.
Yeah, I've sometimes wondered whether it's a bit like horror films, where once you see the monster for too long, it loses its it loses its true horror. That the horror really has to live in our imaginations, and we could have a similar problem here, where they're actually it's impossible to write a really satisfying the posing the concept that once you take this pill you'll see reality is so strong as a premise, and you can never really live up to the magnitude of the possibilities, because you always have to narrow down to some choice, and in your imagination it was so much possibility that learning the truth is always feels like a loss. It's a loss of you begin by blowing open. You say everything you know is wrong. That's exciting. Now this is the truth. Feels disappointing almost whatever you do. So I don't know how we can overcome that problem.
He wakes up in the Shire and all is solved.
I didn't even think of that, but that's perfect.
What did you expect from me?
The Shire is interesting because it's it always feels like such a beautiful place. Through most of the Lord of the Rings, you're kind of, you're hungry and cold, and there's orcs about, and you wish you were back in the Shire. But the actual the actual portrayed emotions of hobbits is usually they're quite grumpy.
Grumpy.
They're all like gossiping, and so I always found that interesting. That I actually think it's stronger because it would have been unrealistic if Tolkien had portrayed the hobbits as if they were blissfully happy all the time. It's kind of an accurate portrayal of rural English countryside life.
Yeah,
You know,
it's really interesting because
Go
sorry,
on.
I don't want to. Yeah, the problem at the heart of the story is that of human nature, I think. So, and you can't escape human nature if you're going to make a story about human beings, except if the machines really do. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if the machines really do destroy all of humanity, so I mean, then you'd get rid of the human nature problem, but then you'd have no humanity to tell the story about. And I think that's maybe what makes it an apocalyptic story in a lot of ways. That it is revealed to you that there is something bigger. But if you want to describe it like you were saying, and I think that's where Plato's cave metaphor is really good. The guy who's experienced the world outside the cave, when he comes back into the cave, how is he going to put that into language that the other guys are going to understand, that are all still looking at shadows on the wall, and they're like, yeah, whatever, sunlight.
It's like the concept of an eldritch horror.
Yes, you'd go
we kind
mad
of
if
need
you...
we kind of need an eldritch wonder.
That's perfect.
Although,
That's also
in a sense, though, we don't really need a better. So you mentioned Nathan. You mentioned the Zion, which is the name of the. Is that the out of Matrix good guy place? I can't really.
That's
remember.
right. That's the city that they live in the middle of the earth.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I rewatched The Matrix, the original film, but I haven't rewatched the other ones, and I think the general consensus was that they weren't as good. Is that fair?
yeah. They're also quite
Yeah.
interesting, though. I think what
Yeah.
I find interesting is this idea of a mediator. Sorry, that like so if you have apocalyptic visions or even a guy running into the cave, you need that guy. And for Neo, he's trying to get into contact with this Morpheus guy in the beginning of the first Matrix. He's trying to figure out what is up by contacting this guy. So, and that's outside of office hours. So when he isn't being a battery, when he's being kind of a human as he should be, maybe he's and to some degree, I guess the movie portrays that as being a rebel, at least against the machine.
He
Then-
gets told. Finish your idea.
Well, yeah, just to close off, Morpheus
Yeah.
acts as a kind of psychopump that guides Neo through hell. And there are even, I mean, there's a reference to Hades in a sense with the Merovingian. I don't know why they call him that. Maybe Nathan knows.
I don't know.
Where, because his wife is called Persephone, so Neo also kind of has an encounter in the Matrix with Hades, and he's got a guide always on this journey, and I think it's Morpheus mostly. But then there's also the Oracle. There are other mediating figures, and that's also important.
Yeah. He gets told in that the initial interrogation, you've been living a double life. One of these lives has to end, which is really interesting because that's kind of true. He's being offered by the villain that the new life should end, and he's being offered then later by Morpheus that the old life has to end. Which, I mean, from a Christian perspective, the three of us are Christians. I don't think we want to produce a story in the end that is only for Christians, but we're not going to be able to avoid having our Christian worldview influencing what we create, right? I think of it. I think this is probably the way Tolkien would have thought of it as well, right? That we don't want to be being manipulative or writing something as a kind of thinly veiled polemic. We want to create a fully fleshed out world and a narrative and a story as our primary objective, and any additional layers of our own thoughts and commentary have, I think, to be kind of laid into the text naturally, as we as the creators will unavoidably make choices affected by our actual beliefs, rather than starting from the perspective of how do we want to persuade our viewers, and therefore how can we manipulate the story. Do you agree with that kind of framing?
I think it's like whatever you are convinced of to be true, automatically, in a fractal sense, layers itself into whatever you're trying to communicate, or how you communicate at the very least. So the patterns that you use in your communication turns most of what you say into a parable of what you believe, so that people can, at some point, they'll be like, wait a minute, the way you're speaking makes me think that you are a scientist. Or what do you call some a scientismist? Sorry, I was thinking of
Yes.
scientism, and then I was like, scientist isn't someone that. Anyway,
Yes. What is a believer in scientism but a scientist?
Scientologist, that's what it's called. Sorry, Scientologist. I was thinking of, yeah, anyway, or what's something else? Anyway,
Yes, an empiricist or a
all your cosmology, I
positivist.
guess, just comes to expression.
Yeah, but there's a sense in which even if the Wachowskis aren't Christians, they nonetheless have inherited an enormous amount of Christian metaphysics and morality. So it wouldn't be surprising if we unearth a bunch of accidental Christian ideas in this text, I'd say. And I think one of those is that there's this that Neo has a kind of Christian experience of the old self dying and the new self kind of taking over, and then the new self turns out to also have all these awesome new powers. So that's interesting. So yeah, comment. Want to see the take on the red pill blue pill scene? I think that is unavoidably the absolute core and center of the film, and we are going to end up with a version of that ourselves, and that is probably the most key creative decision in the whole project, is how that's tackled. I've even wondered if it's a shame in The Matrix that happens in a single scene, and it might have been stronger to almost pose that choice and then have the main character wrestle with it over the course of a good third of the entire running time. It feels a bit like you're posed with the most interesting character choice of the piece, and then he makes the decision immediately, when actually it would have been better for the audience to be posed with that choice and then to feel the pull of both of the pills for a while during the story. Obviously, the audience wants Neo to take the red pill, if nothing else, because presumably the blue pill story is pretty boring, right? You go to the cinema to watch Neo just go back to the office again and keep writing spreadsheets. But you do want I like that there's a character in the story who regrets the decision of taking the red pill and actually blames Morpheus and says, "You tricked us. If we'd have known what this was going to mean, we would have stayed in the simulation. Take me back into the simulation." So I want,
I
yeah, go on.
sorry, Luke. Finish what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say I kind of want to explore. Can we make that? I almost want that choice, that decision, to be one of the key plot points that's pulled out to be much more of the script. And in a way, I think we've all had the experience where we've learnt things about the world that are true and in some ways help us to live more effective and virtuous lives, but we also have suffered as a result of knowing the truth. And so it would be, I think, cathartic to see that played out in narrative form, the kind of thought experiment of, well, would we be better not to have even learnt some of these truths, right?
I think that's exactly right, and that is, I think that should be extended throughout the film in a way. Not necessarily the decision, but that idea wrestling with which pills, the temptations, of the blue pill being a strong feature. And you're right, the character Cypher, I think his name is, he the film focuses it all on him, but in a way, I feel like Neo should be wrestling with that even after he's
Yeah.
taken the red pill, whether that was the right decision or not. And I think I have a couple of suggestions how that could be fleshed out. I
Great.
think beforehand, so the setup, because you were saying maybe a third of the film or so, or story, I should say, should be building up to that point. I think there could be a bit more development then of Neo's journey to trying to find Morpheus. Like, why does he start that? Okay, he has a sense, but is there anything more to it? And I almost wondered. I was thinking about 1984 and Winston's character, who is a censor rewriting books.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just the philosophy geek in me, but I thought maybe Neo's working on this and he gets handed a copy of Plato's Republic and he has to
Wow.
censor Plato's Republic, but reads about the simile of the cave, realizes his role within that. Who am I? What am I doing? And it starts him on this process of doubting, the situation around him. It doesn't have to be that, but I feel like there's something in there that some
Yeah.
event needs to kind of spark this start of the process for Neo, and then
Yeah.
the rest kind of follows from there quite naturally. I think why
What-
he
what
would
do
look
we
for Morpheus.
What do we think about the fact that, in a way, it's quite an explosive start to the story, in that he is kind of like from the first like, yeah, you're right, the story starts at the end of his investigation. It's almost like there was a whole other film that we never got to watch before the beginning of the runtime. The first thing we see Neo do is receiving direct communication from the people who know everything, and then they are essentially just info dumping on him pretty quickly at the beginning of the narrative. So it kind of means you don't have to waste a lot of time before getting into the action. But on the other hand, you sort of get overloaded at the beginning of the film with all these crazy things, which is maybe part of the reason that it has such an impact. But it always felt to me like the second half of the film has a very different flavor as an experience, because the first half of the film as a viewer is quite like conceptual and cerebral, and it's got action in it, but you're also getting all these like gut punches of revelations. But then at some point the whole of the board has been set up, the stakes are established, and then you're just dealing with, okay, we know everything now, let's act. And I way prefer the first half. So I think in a way you could probably tease out the revelations, spread them out consistently throughout the whole story, instead of front loading with a bunch of conceptual stuff, because I don't think the film would be better if you went in having already read an explanation and knowing the truth. Like the whole interest in the Matrix film is the discovery of reality, and the acting is a bit secondary. It's like, okay, now we can act, whatever. I really think the thing that's cool about the Matrix is the deep way it makes you question everything.
I was
Well, the-
thinking. Sorry, go.
Go ahead, Philip.
I have. Well, firstly, I was thinking the red pill, blue pill. We can have pizza with pineapple and pizza without pineapple, and that will decide everything for the rest
It's
of the.
pizza either way. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like maybe they've got some pineapple and Morpheus is like, should I add the pineapple, Neo?
It's a yes or no question, but it's anyway. But the other thing was, see, I just had it and then I'd forgotten it again. So there was the pizza, and then so I'm thinking in the beginning of the film, it's usually quite good, or a story in general, if you have some kind of a hook to get the people, and then they're asking what's going on for the rest of the movie, which is what you're suggesting with this encounter, not necessarily with the decision right in the beginning, but maybe an encounter with in the original, it's the encounter with the message that Neo receives from Morpheus, supposedly, or so, and then he first comes into contact with Trinity, I think, or with the agent even. So there's an encounter.
That, follow the white rabbit.
Rabbit.
I think is a really
Yeah.
cool line.
Yeah, the Alice in Wonderland. Even, I mean, you can have two bottles with labels on them instead of pills or something. I mean, yeah, that whole theme is really cool.
Yeah.
But the encounter in the beginning with the people that know is definitely a way to instantly get people into the atmosphere of the film instead of dragging them through some kind of a blind who knows what for a while, and then you get your plot hook, and then the story starts. That you have some kind of a plot hook with the people that know everything in the beginning, but they're kind of portrayed as someone that seems like they're fools, or they don't know anything. Kind of like the wizards in the beginning of Harry Potter, I guess. You see a bunch of people running around the streets in robes talking about some, who has been vanquished, or something. And the Muggles, the Dursleys, are like, okay, whatever, man.
Yeah.
And then the chosen one
Yeah.
ends up on their doorstep.
So I think you want to, just from a tension and drama perspective, you want there to be a thread, like an unanswered question, as soon as possible, that the reader or the listener, like, they have to stick around to know the answer. So you don't want to do 20 minutes of Neo's day to day where nothing is a mystery, and then the mystery starts happening. You want there to be scene one, almost sentence one, some kind of hook, something that grabs you. I'll put that in the what works. Something grabs you immediately, a mystery. Now, we're not talking a J.J. Abrams mystery box where we don't know what's inside it.
No.
We'll just punt that down the road. This is a mystery we actually do know the answer to, and we start revealing it like piece at a time throughout. Yeah.
A breadcrumb trail. Yeah, it allows you to be able to make like an inclusio as well, so that the beginning and the end have some kind of a connection, and that the end throws, like you were saying in a previous stream, throws a light on the rest of the story that you had right in the beginning already. It's like you had it in your hand the whole time. Didn't you notice?
Yeah. Should we briefly talk about? Well, I guess we're still kind of evaluating the original Matrix film rather than suggesting our own. But what are the political messages that people tended to take away or have taken away over the years from the Matrix. I guess the obvious two are that there's the kind of red pill in the pickup artist / men's rights / whatever community, which is, well, so one perspective is, or one kind of idea that people have loaded onto the idea of the red pill is the kind of nice guys finish last, to give it a really like reduced idea, but
I guess it's
just,
Nietzsche in a sense, like
right,
God is dead, wake up
Or
and
the-
be a Superman. Or
yes,
something.
or maybe in some ways it's kind of like the well, maybe I'll put this as a different line. So
yeah, maybe that's Blackpool.
You know, in Machiavelli's The Prince is kind of all the other princes are being given rubbish advice about how you should be nice. I'm telling you that everyone is just out for power, and you should also go out for power, and here's all the tricks you can use. Which is also a nice guys finish last, but more like nice princes finish last. Then there's the claimed meaning, of course, of the creators. They want to claim that it was always about transgenderism.
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So they obviously were the Wachowski brothers when they made The Matrix, and have now become the Wachowski sisters. So they want it to be that Neo was discovering his true gender identity, which I find quite difficult to reconcile with a lot of what goes on in the. I think that the film has far fewer interesting layers, if that's what they were trying to say. I think they lucked into matching onto reality in other ways, if that's what they were really going for. But we'll give them we'll since they made the film, we'll at least acknowledge their claim, which is the true Neo is a woman, I guess.
Well, I guess the if you wanted to steel man their approach here, there is a kind of Faustian individualism implicit in the idea that you're breaking free from the constraints of a society. The thing that's holding you back isn't you, it's not your nature, it's the social order that you are within. And so you need to throw that off, remove all restraints, and just be you. And in a way, the city of Zion reflects that, in that there doesn't seem to be any clear hierarchy apart from maybe there's an elected body who oversee things. But in general, everybody's just equal, everybody's just dancing. There's lots of different kinds of relationship in the crowd. You know, it's so there is this just kind of casting off of the old order, the normal, dare I say it, kind of white business order, capitalist order, and for a kind of one human race communism. So I do think there is, but it's tied in with individualism, like express yourself. So I do think there is elements of that, even if it isn't like just trans. I think it's a broader attitude that the transgenderism is a part of.
It's anarchism in a very fundamental way, I guess. Rebelliousness. Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the Moldbug take, which is that democracy and freedom is an illusion, and actually that there is. Obviously, it's quite linked to Machiavelli, so maybe it should go under the same bullet point. Now I think about it, but Um, the red pill being that once you realize that actually there is a group who are in power, and they are just using the ideas of the French Revolution as a cover whilst they continue to rule over us. Maybe that's another perspective. Okay.
See, so I think, sorry, I
no.
just thought there was a couple of things here that I think, I just want to throw some ideas out there which are connected to this, just for your thoughts.
Please.
Because you were talking about revelations, and it seems to me that there's two of the revelations within the film which could be later on are how did this situation arise? How did the Matrix come about?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the alternative?
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say, for argument's sake, that our characters need to find out the information to why it started because they believe it will help to overturn the system.
Mm-hmm.
In the films, it's presented, oh, the machines beat us in a war and enslaved us. But I think compelling and accurate to today to say that humanity chose to take the blue pill, let's say. That human beings took the choice because it's more comfortable, they have the security, and they embraced the Matrix in that respect. And so our characters then discover that, and it's new news to somebody like Morpheus and Neo and so on. Yeah. Oh, hey, friend.
Le Templar, previously the artist previously known as Cringewalker, has joined us. How are you doing?
Hello from a cold New York afternoon.
It's good to have you. Just because we've been going for, apparently there's a bug on Android that might cause you some problem, but hopefully you won't have any trouble. I just got a pop up in StreamYards. We've just been talking about like kind of going over the Matrix as a film and what we think does and doesn't work. What do you want to just give us your initial thoughts? What did you think of the original Matrix film? Did you like it? And what do you think was its strongest points? What did it do really well?
Well, I didn't really like it when it came out. I had problems with it from more of an autistic scientific perspective of like the brain doesn't make that much power, shut up.
That's true.
But
yes, if you were like a robot on Earth and you were like, I need to generate electricity, there's lots of better ways to do it than what they had tried. Yeah.
So
It's surprisingly efficient, right? The brain runs on almost nothing.
Yeah. It's a pity that obesity doesn't make you smarter.
Chess players are always claiming that they burn like 7,000 calories over the course of a game because they're thinking so hard.
Yeah, so I guess the good part about the plot, I did like the idea that, some people who even know about the Matrix choose to stay in it because the real world is just not great. That's always been compelling to me, I think, because it's you found out that humans are in a computer, but the real world is worse than a computer. It's like, well, why stay out of the computer then? Sorry, I'm letting a pipe and being a gentleman.
Oh man, I should get mine.
Very good.
I noticed that you have priestly garbs, Philip. Have you finally become a proper pastor?
No, I'm working as a deacon in a.
Oh, nice.
So yeah. Thanks.
You get the dog collar even for being a deacon, do you? In Lutheran as well?
Yeah, well, as a seminarian who's striving to become a pastor, I practice wearing the garb, I guess.
Makes sense.
So around the time that The Matrix came out, there was another film. I think it was like trying to do The Matrix but better. And you might have you heard the film Equilibrium?
Yeah, I
With
have
Christian
heard of it.
Bale.
Yeah, Christian Bale.
I don't think I've seen it. What happens in that?
So in that, there's a dystopian future, but there's no like AI or virtual reality. People just take drugs to make the world bearable, and like there's like there's still like the blue pill and red pill, but now it's like the gold pill, and as long as you're taking the gold pill, the grayest of brutalist architecture looks fine and dandy to you. And there's a
Sounds
scene
like,
in there,
Brave New World.
yeah, and there's a scene in there where Christian Bale decides to stop taking the pills, and suddenly he starts seeing better colors and noticing how dreary his reality is.
Mhm.
And then it's like, he wears like these priestly garbs, like the state's official clothing are like the agents of the state wear like priest garbs, right? Because they're like drug priests or something. Anyways,
Yeah.
not to get too off topic, but it also had
You're a
had
drug
something
priest,
called
Philip.
it had martial arts. Probably the nerdiest thing about that was that there were martial arts involving guns, and it was called Guntana. It was like. But anyway, I'm getting off topic.
Did you?
Sorry,
Yeah, go.
just quickly, because it's an important plot point in Equilibrium. It's similar to what Nathan was suggesting, that a copy of Plato's Cave is found, and the whole thing of censorship is at the heart of the plot. Equilibrium also there's like a ban in society on art and literature, so people aren't allowed to read and they're not allowed to have art.
Oh yeah, beauty's not allowed.
Yes, exactly. So that's just an interesting plot device that one might also the
Very
censorship.
progressive.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I thought I'd also so let's say what works is the first half of this document. By the way, are you clear on the objective here, Lethem Flower? We're
Not
trying-
at all. I don't read.
I'm trying to write a new work of fiction, which I want to harness some of the stuff that worked about the Matrix, but it's not really a Matrix rewrite, despite the name of the stream and the name of this document. It's more of just using this as a springboard. Let's put this second half of the document as a new concept, and it's probably worth having similar categories. So these things we probably want to copy down because they were good, so we'll keep them. Or at least let's remember to consider similar stuff to this. Obviously we don't want an actual follow the white rabbit, but we do want to make the most of any kind of little references.
Follow the
as an
Pepe.
example. Should the characters all be frogs?
Everyone should talk with the Jordan Peterson accent. I think that's like a slightly different variation.
Everyone is just doing their impressions of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
One of the political ideas that I'm quite interested in is the limits of quantification / the value of beauty.
Intuition as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an interesting idea at the heart of the Matrix movies as well, where it has something to do with willingness to sacrifice, and Neo ends up sacrificing or losing Trinity anyway. So he makes the sacrifice kind of involuntarily, and then he himself can become what he needs to be. So it's never really, I mean, they portray it, I think, as a self-sacrifice because he is sacrificing the person that he loves. But he's not actually sacrificing himself. In the first movie he does, kind of. I don't know how voluntary that is. But I also just find that interesting in relation to how you relate to the kind of cosmic spirit, which is also fundamental to the Matrix. That there is some kind of like fundamental cosmic spirit or something that you have to make a contract with. In the Matrix, I guess it's the machines. I don't know if there's something deeper there. And it requires sacrifice. And the relation or the way you do that can lead to like war, or it can lead to slavery.
What is the in the Matrix? What movies? What is the specific sacrifice that Neo makes?
Well, I don't know. It's almost as if he sacrifices everything else other than himself, as if he has to learn to let go of everything, and then by doing that individuate, so he becomes himself by letting go of everything else, instead of sacrificing his individuality for the sake of a more cosmic whole. That would be a more like Eastern religious idea, I think. And that also plays a role in the story somehow, but to me it's a bit strange how they relate to one another.
It'd be interesting to just go through what challenges Neo faces, and I'm more interested in his character challenges than, so for example, once he acquires the ability to do kung fu or do a sort of slow motion backflip, he just executes them at the moment he needs to save his life. And I don't think there's much of a challenge to his character in just performing the action that he needs to do in the moment so that he doesn't die. You don't have to be a hero to try to save your own life. But I think when the film starts, there's kind of an implication that he has been kind of curious and dogged in like following, in trying to investigate. Then there's the, will he go with the strangers clubbing? That's the follow the white rabbit thing, which is kind of it would have been more comfortable for him to stay in his room. You know, he's kind of entering the unknown.
It's Bilbo's leaving the Shire in a sense, leaving what is actually so idyllic for the sake of finding out what's actually true, what allows you to have your ideal paradise utopia. Is it maybe at the cost of something that you wouldn't morally be able to subscribe to if you knew that it were the case? Can you allow yourself to recognize this? And I think that piecemeal revelation that you were talking about in the beginning is that'll play an important role. Like, you see bits and pieces of the big horror, the eldritch horror lying behind the veil, and you're kind of in denial all the time. But at some point, you have to make a decision. Otherwise, you become compromised.
There's the trust the voice on the telephone in the office scene, which I think is a really great scene. He has to, dive from one cubicle to another, and then he has to even climb out of the window, right, and go along the scaffolding. So he has to, even with his life. So that's a kind of an expression of faith, right? He's doing something dangerous, but because he has faith in the information he's receiving, then he's prepared to take action.
That's true, but in this case, at the end he gives up because he's like, I'm going to die if I go out on that scaffolding. I have to make a jump, which of course later in the film that would be no problem to him. But at this point, he's not ready. And through his training with Morpheus later, when they're doing the kung fu, you're fighting me like, I think they say something like, you're fighting me as if this was just like the normal rules of physics. But you've got to realize what the Matrix is and what you could do in it. And so that's one of his challenges through the film, is learning to engage with a computer reality or a simulated reality, and manipulate it to his advantage.
lucid dreaming.
Yeah. Admin mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God mode. Yeah.
Sudo jump.
And actually, is there not a test, one of his training modules, where he's meant to do a jump across buildings
Yeah.
again, and he dies like on first go.
Mhm.
So this jumping keeps coming back. Actually,
So, I mean, an important aspect to all of this is that you have to trust that truth, which you are hesitant to let yourself in on fully. Some part of you has to know it's better. The truth is actually good. Like the truth is inherently good, and so no matter what the cost is,
Yeah,
you
so
have
kind
to
of
go there
skipped
because
the take the red pill moment, which is clearly a character moment for Neo, right? That's here. Choose to know truth. And I guess this is a political point. Well, I guess I could put it here. I'll stick it down here for now. Which is, it is better to know the truth. In general. Are there any other key character moments that happen during the film for Neo?
he dies.
We've got
He-
the main ones. Oh,
Well,
go on.
part of the process of seeking the truth, like when he starts the journey, he initially gets possessed by that thing in his belly.
Oh yeah.
So the unseen forces of the world attempt to increase his like shackles or enslavement to prevent him from getting free. And this is actually quite a Christian theme where demons usually tolerate a society's enslavement to sin to a certain degree, but if someone tries to like break free of it, they like double up on that person. So they kind of like reserve their power level a little bit until they need to really use it.
What do you think that bug is symbolizing? You said you think it's possession. It happens after the interrogation scene, right? He doesn't comply with the interrogation, and so they put the tracker in him, and it's the tracker that the Matrix is going to use to follow them.
Yeah, this happened a lot in real life with like if one person was found to be a Christian, they wouldn't usually kill that first person. They'd track them to the rest of the church and then kill them all in the Roman Empire.
Yeah, and there's
So-
obviously the pun that he's been bugged.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
I think it,
It's
Go on.
it's kind of just, I suppose it's a sort of cool futuristic portrayal of the kind of subterfuge that's necessary when you're trying to subvert information agencies, maybe.
Well, it's also a good example of how things built for a system are often less than the system itself. Like you'd imagine like a super advanced AI would be able to track every single port of entry for its world, but in fact, this is also in biology and other things. But like for example, you only have like I think 100 terabytes of neurons in your brain, but they generate like hundreds of terabytes of data. How is that possible? It's primarily because they're not like linked in a linear way, but in a matrix formation. Like your brain is a mini matrix. And because the neurons have multiple connection points to each other, the brain kind of like is greater than its individual. Like if you summed up the total capacity of each neuron, it would be less than the total capacity of the brain. And it's a weird kind of feature of networks. In the same way, the matrix, even though like it's a computer system, it's controlled environment. The matrix itself, in many ways, exceeds the capacity of the machines that made it, and they can't fully guard or control everything. So they have to use things like trackers. They have to like regulate it and limit it because it's actually a little bit beyond their own abilities. And this is also a bit of a testimony of reality itself, where like, you know, God himself is outside of reality and beyond it. And in many ways, because he's outside of it, because he's outside of reality, he can exceed reality. If he were in reality, he wouldn't be able to be God proper because he would be within the constraints of reality. He would never be able to fully imbue reality. This is like a complex philosophical concept where like the sentience is always less than the vessel for the sentience. If that makes sense. Like your brain will always be more than your consciousness. Your reality will always be greater than the demons can manage. Matrices will always be greater than the individual programs on them. It's a really weird feature of what happens when you have a network. And this might be something you could play with in terms of like, demons can't fully fill reality. They can't fully control reality. They can't control God poking into it and liberating a part of it. It's beyond them. They can try, and they can double up their efforts, but it's a bit beyond them. Like demons exist within reality, but reality is greater than the demons.
Mike Mironov says, any thoughts on parallels between taking red pill and eating forbidden apple? By the way, I am keen for people who are watching live to comment in chat, or people who are watching back to comment underneath the video. I'd like as much input here as possible. So what do we think? Is there a link intended, or does a link emerge between taking the red pill and eating the forbidden apple?
As we know from
the
evolutionary psychology. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. But certainly, taking the red pill gives knowledge to Neo, so that's a link. Although, in the story at the beginning of Genesis, eating the apple is clearly the wrong thing to do, whereas I'd argue in The Matrix, taking the red pill is clearly the right thing to do. It could be a Wachowski commentary on Genesis, like a rebuttal. Like, it's almost a snake-like comment that God was trying to hide things from you.
You could add into that as well the symbolism of when he takes the red pill, what happens? He sees himself naked in the pod, just as in Genesis they realize their nakedness, they become aware of their situation, as it were, and then seek clothing. So there is this kind of moment of self-consciousness, I guess, in both situations.
Yeah, I wonder if a part of their commentary is that the machine is the church. I wonder if there is some of that going on as well, because that would play into the revolutionary or anarchistic kind of philosophy.
I also think there's a sense in which the Neo character, it's almost unavoidable, is a messianic figure. You see Jesus in Neo. He is the promised, prophesied savior. Are there any other ways you see Neo being almost a type? As we should be quite good at spotting Christ analogies since we do it so often in studying the Bible.
Well, at the end...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ruth.
I was gonna say, in some senses, the directors are forced to concede immediately after they question the Genesis narrative, because of course Neo isn't ready for the truth initially. He does have to die a little bit before he can receive the gift of eternal life. So this happens a lot of times where attempting to question a biblical narrative inevitably ends. You end up reinforcing. Yeah, you end up reinforcing it actually.
I was just going to say, in the messianic connection, we see the end of the film. What happens is Neo is killed by Agent Smith. He loses the fight. Then Trinity kisses him. So the love of the Trinity helps bring Neo back to life. And with his new knowledge and powers, he is impervious to the demon Smith or Agent Smith and is able to defeat him. So they're very heavily drawing upon the death and resurrection of Christ there. The
Yeah, I think
it's impossible to miss.
One of the inspirations for the Wachowski whatever's was the two.
Duo.
Yes, the mention was I think Friedrich Schleiermacher, who's a German theologian, and one of the fathers of liberal theology. And to me, a lot of their tendencies, because of this anarchism and so on, it seems like they are also taking their Christology is actually a liberal Christology in the sense that it's not the biblical one, but they take the motifs out of scripture, like they abstract a kind of pattern out of it, and they turn Jesus into a revolutionary archetype of some sort, and use him in a Gnostic sense. That's actually, yeah, that plays nicely into the whole Platonic philosophy, is that the story is actually in a lot of ways Gnostic, although also not. I mean, a lot of philosophies are contradictory in this way, that you strive to escape your material nature and to reach the heights of truth which are in a hidden knowledge of some sort. And yeah, so there's that with the red pill, blue pill scenario. And there was something else that I've lost myself in the rabbit hole, but yeah, no, I've lost it. I'll get back to it if it comes up again. But the Gnostic idea is important there, I think. Which is, I think it's false. That's what it was, because it's also kind of like what Alfempla was talking about. That my goodness, my brain is a sieve today. I've literally forgotten what I was gonna say. No, okay, then someone else should
It'll
take
come
over.
back to you.
Yep.
Interrupt us when you remember.
There's a little bit of in the end, this is a bit ahead, but there's that episode when he goes to see the architect, and the architect shows him the past failed incarnations of his messianic role in the previous matrices, and how he's come to he's like kind of come the furthest, but they all fail in the same way that Christ is like the first successful true prophet after a line of like murdered prophets and such. But there's an interesting thought there where this is more sci-fi, but as we get brain computer interface working, if I'm kind of doubtful that'll ever happen, but there's a weird technological immortality that comes from that, because once you can download your memories onto hardware, you can perpetually clone yourself and put your memories back in and essentially live forever. They won't actually be you. They'll just be your clones with your memories replicated over every time you die. So in some sense, you can become like your own avatar of sorts, where you can learn from your past failed selves and perfect yourself into the next iteration. Even though they're each like individuals, they're also like part of a continuous stream of consciousness of sorts. Now that's what technology. Yeah.
Well, just in terms of the biblical narrative as an example, but it's just built into human nature. You do that when you procreate, and that's kind of the story of the Messiah, if we're using the term messianic. It's the fact that there have been a whole bunch of messiahs through the history of Israel, but they've never actually they've never fulfilled the prophecy. They've only fulfilled parts of it, and so after they die, which isn't supposed to happen, he's supposed to rule in eternity. The people are again, confused, and they turn to their own ways. The one thing that I wanted to say earlier was that you were kind of describing, as I understood it, Luthempla was, and here's a John Calvin quote: "Finitum non capax infinitum." the finite cannot cannot contain the infinite, which Lutherans disagree with, and that's like a paradox and a mystery or something. But yeah, I find that interesting. That I think that's the Gnostic idea, that the material shouldn't be containing the spirit, and so we should strive to escape that. That's this anarchistic idea. Whereas a more, I mean, not that Calvinists necessarily believe that, but the idea of Christianity in general is that you should subordinate yourself to the godly structures instead of becoming a slave to demonic structures. I guess that's the
Yeah. There's a bit of a narrative in that where you know, maybe the debate around free will is such that you don't have either free will or predestination, but rather the more you predestine yourself, well, the more God predestines you to be like Christ, the freer your will becomes to follow Him. Which is I've kind of like grown to like that idea where the more you constrict yourself, the freer you are in the sense. So like the more you constrict yourself to the divine structure, the more you rearrange how your life is structured to God's structure, you actually end up having more free will because you're not answering to your passions and various things. So in many ways, as your flesh approaches the perfection of Christ, your soul has more grasp, more space to be infinite in of sorts, if that makes sense.
There's also the doorkeeper for archetypes. The what's his name? The key maker guy. What's his name in Norse mythology? With the Bifrost.
I don't remember his name.
North mythology.
Is that the
Yeah,
Bridge
sorry.
Keeper?
Yeah. What,
He's a Marvel character, I should know, but I don't watch Marvel movies.
it's Idris Elba. We need to get him for the.
I
forgotten his name.
thought it was worth just mentioning the Oracle, who I also find very interesting. The Oracle is described in the film as
Well, she predates the Matrix.
it's almost a
There's a fan theory.
Bombadillion, to coin a phrase.
Yeah, there's a fan theory that she was the robot that received humanity's surrender and kind of motherly tried to take care of the subject.
But I was interested in her role in the film as part of a conversation about determinism, because she appears to know the future, and lots of the stuff we're presented in the Matrix is of the form, this is high tech. It's kind of still functioning within the rules of our universe. It's just a really clever simulation. But a character who can actually see into the future has genuine magical powers and moves the story more into a fantasy realm. But
there's
then it's also suggested that the Oracle's prophecies are more like self-fulfilling prophecies, where she doesn't so much tell you things that will happen, but things that you need to hear. So then you go back to wondering, are the prophecies actual prophecies, or is this more a commentary on the way that people have supernatural beliefs? So there's an ambiguity about that, I think.
There's a bit of a scientific way about that. You know, if you could build a perfect matrix and know the position and vector of every simulated like element in that matrix, you would be able to predict its entire experience because you already know every point and vector. So there's kind of no room for free will, no room for choice, because you already know how everything's going to interact. So one of the ideas is that the Oracle knows because she's seen so many iterations of the Matrix. She knows how character types will interact with each other, like typologies will interact. She's more like you can think of her as almost like a Jungian mistress, if you will. She knows all the Jungian archetypes and how they'll interact with each other. So she simply is describing the interactions, and if you fall into those categories, you will interact with reality in the way she foretells.
So when she
Like Lady
says,
Wisdom.
yeah.
From a Christian perspective, a character like an oracle can be described as like It's not quite a prophet. It's more like a hmm, like a if you're a if you're a 6,000-year-old angel or demon, you've seen enough humans to know how most people will react or interact. Unless God creates someone truly unique, the patterns will continue over and over again. I used to scare my sister with ghost stories about this, where I would be like, my house has occasionally had spooky things. When my grandmother died, there were like footsteps that we would hear and things like that. And I would scare her by saying, "Oh, that's not my grandma. That's not our grandma. That's just her demons that have been around her for so long they can perfectly mimic her because they remember how she would act. How to spook her out." You can
I can
almost think
imagine.
you can almost think like ghost stories are simply demons after the soul has died. They've spent so many decades observing the subject that they can perfectly mimic it, and they're doing that to get the trust of the loved ones to gain access to the next victim. So every ghost story is a potential demon that's just pretending to be the subject to get trust, to gain trust. In the same way that like the oracle gains your trust by simply like inhabiting the patterns you recognize and like telling you what's going to happen. Oh, I can trust this person. But next thing you know, this is the actual AI that received humanity's surrender and destroyed humanity. So she's also evil.
Did did anybody have any key things they'd like to see in a like missed opportunities almost? What other things didn't happen in the Matrix that you maybe thought when you were first watching it would happen, and then when it didn't, it was kind of disappointing?
Uh, the robots seem so uh, grounded, stuck to Earth. The whole universe is out there, and they don't seem interested in seeing it or getting the yeah, they're stuck on Earth because the sun's blocked. But after enough, if you have enough brains to power reality, surely you can build like a railgun and shoot a probe into space or something.
In a way, your comment is maybe a almost transhumanist complaint. Like, if humanity gets replaced by robots, that's fine as long as the robots are enough like humans. Like, we were disappointed in the robots. We wouldn't mind
Yeah, like
robots taking over as long as they do good stuff.
it's like the robots took over and they decided to just replace the biosphere and continue on Earth. It's like, well, that's kind of a letdown.
But maybe they're not. Maybe they're not curious. I suppose that's something that would be nice to explore. Is AI, especially that's a kind of current. That's a current concern in society. That how do we think about AI? It'd be nice to put some stuff that gives a rumination on that.
I think adding to that is the motivation of the robots and the AI. You're kind of tapping into it there, but all we know is really, well, there was a war between humans and robots, and the robots won. But why did they go to war at all? Why did the robots want to take over human life? It seems...
There's sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
There's an anime that tried to answer that. It's like a Matrix anime, and it's kind of lame. Like the robots just wanted to be considered equal to humanity.
So they conquered them.
Well, in a way, I think we should seek to, in order to make a fully fleshed out and believable world, but also in order to embed a deeper and more interesting commentary on the human condition. We should hope to give both sides a compelling, believable, and identifiably realistic. Like we should find motives that have happened in history and that we can feel within ourselves for both sides.
Have you ever played Stellaris?
I haven't played it. I know the game. Yeah.
there's various robot factions you can pick, and one of them is called the Caretakers. And it's kind of a scenario where you start off as the robots that conquered humanity, but humanity is still around. They're in stasis chambers, and the robots, instead of like, if you were playing as an organic civilization, you have like civilian happiness that you have to worry about in Stellaris. But if you play as the Caretaker robots, their happiness is derived from how many biological populations they have in stasis. It's kind of and they're called biological trophies, and the robots have a drive to collect biological trophies. And the funny thing is, when you declare war as playing with this faction, you don't say you're declaring war. You say you're activating extreme caretaking protocols. So like it's kind of funny. Like Stellaris really plays with the idea that AI programming won't have the goals of biological species. So like different kinds of AI you can play as have different goals that are derived from like faulty programming. So the Caretakers have the faulty programming where they have to take care of every biological species in the cosmos. That's the only way they'll feel accomplished, is that the galaxy is being taken care of well. They're like butler extremists basically. And there's also like the classic extermination where biological life is inferior, so it must be wiped out. But I actually really like the Caretakers because like your entire campaign in Stellaris is to make sure every biological creature is happy by any means necessary, and that often involves destroying things that can't be made happy.
So to jump in there a little bit and add maybe a different perspective or another perspective is the like either one can have as the opposite if you've got, I don't know exactly, I missed a bit of the conversation just now, but if one is thinking about the kind of conflict between humanity and the machine in the Matrix and looking for something similar in our retelling, I was also wondering, are we, because you mentioned eldritch horrors, Luke, one can go in the direction of scientific, which would then like be AI, maybe aliens, some kind of a scientific, biological or mechanical or technological explanation for the metaphysical opposite. Like in AI, you've got kind of humanity trying to reproduce itself, which is that's kind of a metaphysical or religious question. The image, how is that passed on, or where does it come from originally? And it's processed by means of technology. Or you've got the Eldritch question, which is like the gods, and they originally created humanity as a slave race, which is obviously that's not what I believe. But that's like the Babylonian kind of approach, I guess, to where do we come from as humanity? We're kind of the AI in the story, and then eventually we topple the gods or something like that. And so the difference is one between a hard and soft magic system or metaphysics, if you will. You've got on one hand a technological attempt to escape to frame the cosmic story, or you've got a more spiritual attempt, which has more to do with, I guess, morality and so on, to try and frame the story. And that would mean that either you're going to go in the direction of AI or you're going to go in the direction of eldritch horror. I was trying in the story that I'm writing about Leipzig to do both, and I'm still not exactly sure about some aspects of it. I don't know if I'm really going to go that far in the AI direction anymore.
I'll be right back.
Yeah,
Sure.
That hideous strength, we've spoken about that before, Luke, but that essentially is what Philip's talking about. You think it's the reign of scientists and technocrats is the main enemy, but it turns out they're serving the devil, and it's like, okay,
Right.
that's the real battle that's going on here. So I guess, yeah, you can have that shift. It's quite hard to execute. I think many readers of that hideous strength find it a bit jarring, but many others think it's the natural kind of insight coming forth. But it's a harder thing to manage, I think, than one or the other.
It's tricky if you don't signpost it at all.
Mhm.
I really like it as a reveal. I think it almost is a further red pill, in my opinion. Like, first you realize that there's darker forces in the world serving their own human ends, and then you realize that those dark forces are actually serving the ultimate spiritual enemy of God. So it's kind of, I think there's a real verisimilitude of that discovery.
And that would continue the spreading out the revelation rather than all at the beginning, like you
Exactly.
were wanting. Like, yeah.
Which, of course, isn't something that was ever going to happen with the Wachowskis, because, as far as I know, they don't believe in the devil. So that's partly why The Matrix feels hollow, because the revelation is so kind of silicon and technological, rather than it's like so you've got the fleshly reality, and you dig down and you get the kind of cool sunglass wearing Matrix reality. But I kind of think if you dig down, what you should really discover is a magic reality. Actually, that's probably one of the philosophical ideas I will also want to include, which is that like the ancient world had truths and magic and wisdom which we've lost. So it's kind of an anti-progressive
Yeah, we're still here. Sorry.
we're I mean, I don't want to denigrate this stream, but we're not outdoing Solomon in terms of wisdom.
No,
Right?
no.
There's
But
a comment. I've been thinking of a concept that I call soul engine. Machines without humanity are like a bullet fired from a gun, unable to change direction. To circumvent this issue, they keep humanity alive. Interesting.
For the like unpredictable element, that is quite interesting.
So like machines use humans to affect change. That's a cool idea. Almost like hinging off the concept of free will, that there's some almost random number generator, like an RNG engine within the soul. It's the only true source of randomness.
Well, I mean that ties in a lot with kind of Kantian philosophy, which has dominated modernity. The idea that you have the material world of cause and effect, and everything's determined within that, but the moral and personal is the realm of free action. And philosophers like Bergson would talk about the original impulse, or elan vital, that spark which is totally undetermined. So if a machine is one of cause and effect, its whole operations are cause and effect, how could it ever have that original impulse which leads to innovation or new civilizations and so on? It couldn't actually improve. So there is something quite compelling about that idea.
What I find interesting is that, I mean, humans aren't even that ingenious either if they don't have some transcendent input. Like, they're not that free. They usually become like slaves of their belly. They become hedonists of some sort or another if they don't have, if you want to put like the hedonistic or Epicurean and Stoic philosophies as like two ends of a spectrum. If they don't have a transcendent logos, then you just serve your own stomach essentially. Yeah, that's it.
Now,
Is there a question? Sorry, Luke, go ahead.
Please. No, you go, Nathan.
Well, because we've been talking about a couple of things. One is the choice whether to go back into the Matrix or not is something that continues through. And then also this idea of these magical realities and it's a spiritual contest and the need for transformation beyond just what you see, like knowing there's a simulation. But I guess then, for those who leave the Matrix, do they all unite, or are they on different sides on the spiritual war as well? So, do some of them realize the truth and say, okay, I'm going to serve Satan or this eldritch horror, like, and become its administrator? Maybe I oversee the Matrix or something like that. And then there's others who are in resistance both to the Matrix and to the horrors. How would you think about that?
I was wondering about I often find it annoying when a story becomes, we need to save the universe. You're the one person who can save everything. So I was tempted to suggest that once the main character escapes the illusion, that they then just, like, the conclusion of the story is just that they survive. Like, they don't pick a side, they don't solve the conflict. In fact, I quite like the idea that there is it's almost like there's the elite and the counter elite in some way at war, and you need to just eke out a living as a neutral, the kind of Han Solo smuggler role, right? You realize that neither the Empire nor the Rebel Alliance are actually good, which I think is kind of an interesting. Because there's something satisfying about just a band of good guys fighting against a Rebel Alliance kind of concept. But I also quite like, I do like the other idea, which is there's a war going on and the story just has that as the backdrop. And it's the smaller scope, I think, actually gives you much more leverage when your drama doesn't need to be this complete universe defining story. Almost as a viewer, you've got more uncertainty about where things are going. You're no longer thinking this is about the destiny of everything. You're experiencing a story within a broader universe.
It's have you guys played Halo?
Uh-huh.
The real question. Now the stream begins.
Let's make a game.
Yeah. Let's call it Halo. No, well, I had to think of that because of the blue-red pill dichotomy. But what if it's the blue pill versus the red pill, like blue team versus red team, and the real revelation behind the revelation is that both are attempts to blind the individual, and that there is actually the truth and absolute good or something like that, but it doesn't lie within the house that has been divided against itself. And so there's like a force behind it that's pitted two forces against each other, that's divided in order to conquer, and that's the true evil. And that or maybe anyway, that there's another kind of unexpected hidden party that's actually winning the war, but it's not where you would expect it or something like that, which is I don't know how one would bring that in there though, but that definitely adds a third dimension to the
there is kind of suggested in the films itself, not this kind of elaborate version of it, but that the resistance is containment, because it's kind of suggested, well, we've profiled all these people and like 0.2% are going to go down this route, and we will probably crush them, but we'll reboot it by having a messiah figure who then helps to restart humanity or restart the human resistance over and over again. So there is this sense that the machines themselves know the conflict with Morpheus and so on is a rigged game. So it's in there, It's not really fully explored. Whereas I think this would bring that concept to greater fruition.
Says Mike Mironov, I'd like to see why the robots stuck with humans when they have better ways to make energy. It's a bit like what Templar was saying earlier. Are they actually kind of attached to them as their creators? Do they love them? Well, there is this interesting thing, of course, with... It's like C-3PO always saying, thank the maker. Like, this funny thing where if we make robots, we are their gods. We've created them. So if there's AI or something, even if it's superior to us in intelligence, does it owe us some kind of duty? That's quite an interesting thought experiment. One of the things I was hoping to do on this stream, and let's blast through it because we don't want it to get boring, but I love analyzing story structure. I got really into the hero's journey, both as a result of, like, I love Star Wars, and obviously George Lucas was a student of Joseph Campbell, who wrote Hero with a Thousand Faces, and then Peterson kind of reawakened my interest in hero's journey stuff. And then the 3-act structure, which I think is a little bit Hollywood's reappropriation of the hero's journey to some degree. It's like no, Nathan, you disagree?
It comes from Aristotle.
Oh, really?
Aristotle was analyzing tragedy, Greek tragedy, and devised that there's a 3-act structure to, and it's kind of stuck ever since. So Hollywood maybe have corrupted it. Say that.
I don't know as much about the 3-act stuff, so if this isn't a good representation of it, then let me know. But I thought it would be good to just blast through and stick the plot points of the Matrix into both of these frameworks, and I think that as we go through might unearth. I don't want this to be a boring rote exercise. I'm hoping that as we do this, we're kind of dissecting, like we've got the story out on the dissection table, and as we open it up, hopefully we'll uncover some stuff. Like we'll almost unfold the like read between the lines and suddenly be like, oh, one of the reasons this does or doesn't work, one of the reasons I do or don't like that aspect of the movie is actually in the way that it does or doesn't fit one of these kind of story structures. And I'm quite convinced that we are narrative beings deeply, and part of the way that we understand everything is by telling stories. So there are all these hidden patterns that we naturally look for and recognize. So I'm not, in a sense, I want to say that a good storyteller tells their story naturally in a way that is satisfying and has some symmetry, and this is merely a way of codifying it after the fact. So you can't necessarily, as an artist, slavishly follow one of these plans, but nonetheless, I hope this exercise will turn up something helpful. What do you think about that? Is this going to be a useful thing to do? Should we give it a go?
A useful abstraction method.
If it's not proving useful, then we'll stop. But let's get going. So, first of all, the inciting incident happens pretty quickly, right? So I don't know how much setup there really is. Does anyone remember the very opening? Does it literally start with "Follow the White Rabbit"?
It starts with Trinity. She's getting away from an agent, and she has the phone call and disappears, and so there's a bit of action, but then it moves straight to Neo.
Well, let's put the setup scene then as the mysterious disappearing phone call mystery. So there's a a thing that happens that is unexplained and quite exciting. But I'd say that the inciting incident is the what is the first text that comes up on the screen? Anyone remember? It eventually says "Follow the White Rabbit" anyway.
But it is contact, I guess. With
Yeah.
with the spirit realm.
The point of no return feels like maybe let's say oh well, isn't there that scene with in the car where it's like either you get out of the car now or you're with us.
Hmm.
Let's put that in for now.
Isn't it the blue pill, red pill though? Or maybe it
Well,
is
I was
before
wondering
that.
if that was the turning point, but
Hmm.
maybe you're right. Let's put it in. Let's pencil that in for now. We can shuffle these about later. I mean, well, or you think the point of no return is taking the pill? Yeah, I think you're probably right. Okay, let's put the red pill, blue pill here. Because realistically, that's when he's told there's no return after this, right?
Hmm. That's like
there's
he's
almost literally Morpheus's text like that.
yeah.
So then the first turning point is probably all of that info dump where he explores the real world. Learns about the Matrix and war, etc. The rising action then is maybe the training sequence.
And the fight with the agent.
Hmm.
That was also in the first one.
So then the midpoint, let's say, is the visit to the Oracle. The sub point, I think, has to be Cypher, who betrays them. Right? They're in the simulation, and he starts killing people. A second turning point, maybe when he gets captured.
Oh, the capturing of Morpheus.
Ah. Yeah. Hang on. When does the betrayal happen? Is that before or after that?
I think it's at the same time. Well, it's happening. It's what leads to Morpheus getting captured, because the rest of them are getting. Morpheus stays behind to let the rest get away, but they're getting killed off while that's happening.
Yeah. So then they go into the Matrix to rescue Morpheus. The climax then is presumably that battle with Agent Smith. And then after the battle is done, what happens then? So they save Morpheus. And then the denouement is this, Neo is the one. And he's got all these superpowers. Does that seem reasonable?
Mm.
Okay. So that's more or less the shape of the story. And as I say, this whole of the end bit is kind of action. And this is all of the learning stuff about the Matrix. Maybe even just the kind of the first act is my favorite bit. And often, is it true they say that the middle act is the lowest point for the characters? You have a kind of almost a mini entire story in the first act, and then you have a real, like, you get kicked. Everything seems lost. I guess that's the capturing of Morpheus. And then it's the final act also should link back to... I always think that the final act ought to show the character development primarily. So in a really well-written story, the climax requires some character strength that the protagonist was missing in either the first or second act.
Well, the thing that changes for Neo is, if you remember why he's in the Matrix, why Morpheus gets captured, he's gone to see the Oracle, and she's told him, or implied, I don't think it's quite explicit in her words, it's kind of ambiguous, but she says something to the effect of, which he takes as, "You're not the one." Morpheus believes this, and he then stays to make sure Neo can get away. Neo then, he's back with Trinity on the ship, and he is, because he feels that guilt, but also he knows he's not, or he has that sense he's not the one, wants to go and rescue Morpheus. And he's willing to give his own life to do that. But in the process of doing that, he comes to actually realize he is the one. So there is this sort arc in his self-belief or his trust in what others have said, which allows him to do something which you couldn't do before.
And he does sort of have that... he does have that moment where he doesn't manage to jump, right? That's kind of him failing to believe in himself. Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
I think there's even a moment where, because when they're saving Morpheus and Trinity get out, because there's a phone in an underground station or something, and Neo's just about to get there, and Agent Smith turns up, and rather than running away to find another phone, he stays to fight, and Morpheus says he's starting to believe, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's that moment there.
Should we also fill in the hero's journey version? So I think that's the refusal of the call is unable to jump off building. So then if we work backwards from there, the call to adventure surely is the message on the computer. So then the ordinary world, even though we're not really shown it that much, but I guess we're shown it in as much as visually it's a guy in his bachelor pad.
Cracking video
on a
games.
computer.
Yeah.
We do see his office job as well in the next scene.
Oh yeah, all right, we'll put that here. Even though they're slightly interleaved, but the call to adventure kind of happens a couple of times in a way.
I also think the refusal of the call, in a sense, is also more the lack of faith, and then so because the story is one of overcoming your self-doubt, I guess, if it's about this kind of individuation through freeing yourself from the shackles of the constructs of society, or I don't know what, then that's it's the lack of faith in your own imagination that's a refusal. And then at the end he overcomes this and believes that there really is no spoon.
I'm gonna have to head out because my phone's dying. I'm at 2%.
Well, thanks for joining.
I'll try to hop in and is this towards the end of the stream basically?
I mean, let's assume we'll do another 15-20 minutes. I don't know if you guys are still good for that.
It's the pre-climax.
Yeah. Well,
we're-
I'll try
we're-
I'll try
we're
I'll try
coming
to
towards the end.
hop back in 10 minutes.
Okay,
I'll
you're,
charge my
you're
phone and see
welcome.
if I can. Yeah.
I'll keep an open eye. Sorry, where was I at? Tests allies and enemies, which are kind of grouped together, but this is like the martial arts training, Trinity and Cypher and the gang. And he's kind of told about the agents in the simulations as well, right? So he's given the lay of the land, and this is kind of this is like the mini story at the beginning. So this in the middle is telling you is more pointing you towards the ordeal that is coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
The inmost cave is maybe the building Morpheus is. I mean, this. I think this is also the belly of the beast, or like going into rescue the father. And if you think of it as rescuing the father, it has to be Morpheus because he's clearly the father figure. So this is the like skyscraper. Now, probably a symbolic mistake in the Matrix is that Morpheus was held up in the sky. He should have been in an underground lair. But, you know, we all make mistakes. The ordeal, let's say, betrayal of Cypher? Or is this the battle? Oh, plus, let's also say it's the battle with Agent Smith. Maybe that one's more important.
And his resultant death as a
Yes.
consequence of that.
Yeah.
Where
The
does
reward
the
that. Go on.
I'm just wondering about the betrayal, if that also doesn't fit in earlier somewhere. Like, because that's a low
maybe.
point, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe it's part of the allies and enemies because he's kind of initially seen as an ally, but then revealed as an enemy. So in the hero's journey, because it's a big circle, you leave your world, you cross the threshold, you have your adventure, and then you cross the threshold back, but you now have new powers. In the original Matrix film, does Neo, in any sense, and kind of another question for should we aim to have Neo kind of return to his office in some way? Like, we're not really shown him having a great deal of friends and family in the Matrix. So when he then leaves the Matrix, he's gone forever. So I think this is maybe a sense in which it doesn't quite follow the hero's journey pattern so well, because he doesn't, for example, he never meets his in Matrix parents again, does he?
yeah, I watched a playthrough of A Plague Tale Requiem recently, and by the end of that, I mean, it starts off, and in the first game, I don't know if you know these games, Plague Tale, but they're quite like cinematic and whatever. Also, I think, as I read it, an emancipative story to some degree about abortion as well. But like very symbolic. So I don't think it's the first thought that one might have. But essentially, I think it's telling the story of how woman, as an abstract idea, can overcome her motherly instincts. and abort a child, essentially. That, I don't know if I'm reading it correctly, but I was like, well, that's that's pretty intense to tell that kind of a myth. But anyway, at the end of that, it's similar to the Matrix, that you've, like in a Gnostic sense, you've actually escaped the material in a sense. You've reached higher knowledge and you can't go back. And in some ways, that's also the story of Frodo in the Lord of the Rings. He's like, and the Shire has been saved, but not for me. And then he has to go to the furthermost shore.
Yeah.
There is something to it, but at the same time, I think like the first act of the story is a microcosm that bears in it the potential and the destiny of the ultimate end of the story.
But but this is maybe why the end of the original Matrix film falls a little flat to me, because it would be satisfying if, like Frodo, Neo essentially dies, like he sacrifices himself to complete his goal, or because there is a tragic element to Lord of the Rings in that way, or if you wanted it to be truly heroic, Frodo now returns to the Shire and becomes Bilbo, and there's a cyclical element where he
Begets the next generation.
exactly. Whereas in the Matrix, and again, that's probably because there's not quite enough setup in the beginning, and it also feels like just the beginning of a trilogy, in a sense, because he's like, okay, now I've got the powers, now I need to do the saving. So there's a feeling like maybe at the end of the third film we will get a complete cycle. But because his initial situation, everything he knew was a lie, there isn't really anything worth saving to return to. And that's probably, again, something I'd probably want to avoid. I don't want to undermine absolutely everything, probably.
So there is, I don't know, like what this makes me think of is familiarity as a concept, and as something that's like also written into human nature, like the law of God written into your heart, in a sense, that there is something about what a human is, also what a human is supposed to be, that you recognize, and that you are either frightened by because you know that you should know this but you don't, and that's kind of terrifying in a threatening sense. Like you feel your existence is threatened by this because you've never known this, but you know it so intimately at the same time that you don't know, like, if you're still sane. But it's still there, and that like that's why, like in the first act, you've got the microcosm, the big world. After you've experienced it in all its complexity and trauma, is actually the same world that you knew in the beginning in your parents' household, but it's much bigger than you expected, but it's still the same. So there's the symmetry again. Like at the end, you actually do end up in the same place. That's what makes the story meaningful. But you also did have to make sacrifices along the way in order for it to be, in order for the world to be what it is, instead of what you want to force it to be. That was also what made the end of this and a lot of other postmodern stories so tragic and so like depressing. And you just have a sense of, well, now everyone's finished the story and they're depressed and they don't know what to do next because they've overcome their own nature in a sense. They've learned how to no longer be a woman, essentially. But now and that's the Nietzschean kind of idea that now you have to create your own morality. There's no reason for you to still subscribe to the meaningful patterns that are inherent in nature. So you're going to have to come up with something else. And that's not portrayed as, at least I never get the impression that that's something positive. It's like everyone is depressed, which is interesting. Oops.
Another thing I wonder if we can improve on, especially if we're doing if it's going to end up being an audio product in the end, rather than either a novel or a film, is that the protagonist probably needs somebody they can discuss everything with as it's happening. Because everybody Neo interacts with in the film knows more than him. So he's a good protagonist from the perspective that we can be in his shoes and he can ask all the necessary questions. But he doesn't really have any way to process everything that's he can't like re-establish things that he's already learnt in conversation or describe things. Yeah, any event that he is on a mission by himself, it's difficult to do that as an audio play without people being able to talk to each other and say, oh, do this, why don't you grab that, run over here. Otherwise it's just the sound of somebody's footsteps, opening doors, and you're, as a listener, I suppose we could have a narrator. Maybe that's one way. I'll put that in question marks.
Yeah, that's one. I was actually probably thinking more along the lines of a narrator. Otherwise, have you guys played Halo? Sorry, just to bring some symmetry into the conversation. No, but like Cortana is a kind of Jiminy Cricket, right? So if you've got some kind of the embodiment of your conscience that's stuck in your brain, or we could get Keanu Reeves as Johnny Silverhand. I don't know if you guys get that reference, but anyway, that's for the Zoomers.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah, there we go. There you go. Okay.
Yes.
At least someone got it. Now I can die.
Go on.
Well, I've just had an idea that can tie a lot of these things together potentially.
Exciting.
Well, so in War of the Worlds, the text is written by a journalist who's writing for for humanity or whatever. So there are reports that he's seen firsthand. And what if Neo is bringing back his recollections for us, the audience? Because you were saying the problem is he's not kind of had an impact. He's not brought this knowledge to those who are in his world or whatever. Yeah. And you were kind of playing with the idea of doing a War of the Worlds like stream or something like that. So what if in a way we are part of that story? We're invited into that ending moment, but we're receiving from him his dispatches or written account, or it might not even be him. It could be, somebody else is passing on his text, and we're doing a recital of what he's written many years ago or something.
Just to build on that, maybe. Just very briefly, Dracula is also built up in a similar sense that it consists of only diary entries and ship logs and stuff like that. So you've got a bunch of like first-hand documents. So you're always kind of just after a piece of action has taken place. So the character has survived at least to be able to write this. But like how far have they come? And what still lies ahead. So you've got like a piece by piece catching up with the characters after they've experienced something, which would be a bit different to if you've got someone who's already at the end of the story telling the story. But it's similar, yeah.
Yeah. Just to re-explain what Nathan was talking about, that I talked about just briefly on Lambda Bible Studies, which, by the way, I did some... I explored my analytics a bit and discovered that 2/3 of the people subscribed to this channel are not subscribed to Lambda Bible Studies. So if that's you, go and correct that. You're missing most of my content. But anyway, the idea was, what if we made the fictional live streams that would happen if all of this plot line was happening? Suppose people were like leaving the Matrix. We are in the Matrix, but people are leaving the Matrix and discovering this fantastical reality, coming back into the Matrix and bringing with them maybe audio recordings or videos of what happened while they were away, which are then discussed on the types of YouTube live streams that we often watch. So you get the cool effect of like, imagine that this was all happening, but you're going about your normal life, and the only way you catch up on the latest from the Matrix is by tuning into X, Y, and Z regular weekly live stream, where they say, they start out, oh, I tell you what, remember 3 years ago when we were just talking about what the Conservatives were up to? Well, now we've discovered a whole new dimension, so we'd better get on with it. But you could also then add bits of banter that are completely irrelevant, like the panel briefly loses interest in the Matrix plotline and starts discussing, like, what's your favorite cake for 5 minutes before getting back on track. I think there's lots of fun stuff to play with there. So I'm quite keen on this idea. On the other hand, it's already an ambitious concept, and I'm aware that I don't want to bite off more than I can chew, or create like storytelling problems that I can't, that are insurmountable. But it would be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like listening to the radio in the Fallout games, which I never played extensively, but I just have kind of a fun memory of the fact that you can like listen to a radio station and the DJ is talking about stuff. Sometimes it's irrelevant to the world in which you're existing, but it makes that world feel more lived in and real and so on. So
yeah,
I like that.
It makes an already high concept story even more high concept. And in a way, you put up a shield from criticism because your idea is so sophisticated that you can say, oh, if people don't like it, then they're just not smart enough. And I'd rather make something simple and good than try to be too clever about it. So it really just depends whether that concept is tenable. And maybe I'll have a play with it and see if it works. It might be that for this year I put that idea on the back burner and do it another year and just do this one as a straight up play. But at some point I think it would be really cool to do a narrative like was it Orson Welles who did the adaptation
That's
of War of
right.
the Worlds?
Yeah.
Okay, any last thoughts about The Matrix, or any last ideas of things that have occurred to you as essential, either kind of political ideas that we want to include, philosophical ideas, plot points, framing devices? Simon van der Graaf says, in regards to a Matrix-esque story that's very much metaphysical and magical as compared to technological, the Impossible Landscapes campaign for Delta Green, in Delta Green. I'll have to look into that. I do think there's a problem still a nut to be cracked with regards to, is this a sci-fi concept? Like, is it hard sci-fi to some degree, where you create magical events and then explain them all? Or is there fundamentally spiritual fantasy type stuff? I guess I shouldn't say that spiritual and fantasy are the same, but it's a bit like what, Nathan, you were bringing up about C.S. Lewis doing a last-minute switch-up, where what looked like a sci-fi novel became a more kind of supernatural novel. And I tend to think it is better if you don't genre switch in the third act. You want people who read the first two acts and are still reading it to enjoy it, and you don't want people who would have enjoyed it if only they'd got to the end but stopped halfway through because that wasn't their kind of fiction. You want, ideally, that you lay your cards on the table. This is honestly the kind of narrative that you're in for. Do you want to stay or not? At the top, and then You don't want to pull the rug too much. You don't want to be overly clever. You don't want to subvert expectations left, right, and center. What you basically want is that the audience feels like they're smarter than you. You want them to pat themselves on the back, like, "Oh, I knew this was coming."
Yeah, I also think you have to give them the ability to realize that something like what is going to happen at the end is already embedded into the beginning. That's why, like, the
Yeah.
wizards that the muggles encounter in the beginning of Harry Potter, or something like some sort of an encounter with something. I think, at least for me, cosmologically, I wouldn't be able to tell a story that that doesn't end with some kind of connection to spiritual truth. So the spiritual precedes the material and even generates the material world. And the Matrix, I guess, if one takes it in that direction, would look like you're living in the Matrix, so you're living in a fictional world. Then you come into contact with the hard facts about material reality. So you've been living in a fantasy for your childhood or whatever. Then you get knocked out of paradise and you end up in the real material world where there's thorns and brambles and lions and wolves and whatever. But even in that world, you then maybe learn how to build a city or something, or to, till the earth a bit and make something of it. And you grow as a character because of that. But then at the end, the revelation is that someone created the world in the first place. And that, that the reality that you were devastated to get kicked out of was at least symbolically, still telling you about what actually underlies the difficult reality that you've endured when you came into contact with the brute material reality. So there's like a close relatedness between Act 1 and 3 in a sense, and then Act 2 is kind of the chewing and digesting and mastering the material reality that you've fallen into.
Just building on that, one idea, I really didn't think about it too much because I found there's possibility here, but I'm not sure how concretely it could be shaped. But so there's this idea of Neo leaves the Matrix, enters the real world, and then there's this debate about whether going back or not. And we've already kind of suggested that maybe the options outside the Matrix aren't much better. There's this war going on between the blue and the red factions, but in a way they're a containment from the real truth. And perhaps Neo discovers the real truth. Let's just say it's fearing the Lord or something like that. He's living the right life. He's discovered the key to the right life. But then but to me then, that suggests, well, actually, it doesn't matter whether he lives in the Matrix or not. And in fact, is there creative potential within the Matrix that brings back new knowledge on how to do that? Actually, your comments on processing made me think about this, Luke, from the previous stream we did. A simulation, you can do so much with a simulation. It doesn't have to be a boring 9-to-5 office job. You could create. I said the Shire earlier as a joke, but you could live in this simulation of Middle Earth. You could have amazing worlds. You could create genuinely amazing things. Certainly a better way of life for the people within it. And I almost feel like that's actually would be an interesting ending in terms of Neo. If you're looking for how does his knowledge change where he came from, even if it's in a small way, the possibilities with reworking a computer simulation seem like something that could be explored more fully.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have an intuitive dislike of a story that endorses creating a delusion. It would be the equivalent of like Brave New World concluding, like if the author was very clearly pushing everyone towards like, no, just have the Soma. It's going to be way better that way. There's some kind of ethical. but by structuring the story that you have to face reality, it is actually better to do that. Like, either entering back into the Matrix leads you to a tragic end, or exiting the Matrix is a triumph. That is a communication from the creator, the writer, to the audience that you should value truth. Whereas if the story rewards the protagonist for going back into the Matrix, the writer is saying to the audience that truth doesn't matter and it's overvalued. So I almost have an ethical objection to the conclusion of the story being like, make a fake Shire in the simulation and you'll be happy.
I mean, what Jesus does at the end of the biblical narrative and the beginning of ours is is that he goes and he prepares rooms in his father's house for us, right? So he's kind of like earlier I compared the paradise with a fiction, which I don't think is appropriate. I think it's a reality that is still inherent but corrupt in our imagination, and that's why it can generate in us a sense of yearning or longing for something that is lost. But if one thinks of the future and the return of the king and the establishment of a new paradise in a sense, or that's busy happening now because he has overcome the final enemy, which is death, the last enemy. It's like the original paradise has been saved through an ark that was maintained, or not, that was saved through a battle that takes place then through, the history of the world. The history of the world is kind of the battle to guard or keep the Ark of the Covenant, if you will, Zion, and then at the end it can be reestablished without the chosen people, or the people that belonged to the protagonist side. They get to then enter the paradise that is reestablished at the end. Like the symbol at the beginning is maintained in the imagination of the protagonist throughout the story, and then at the end they can use their experience to reestablish it, despite the fact that the world has been destroyed. Something like that, I guess. So that's similar to what Nathan is suggesting, but instead of it being like we create the delusion of what we think we lost, of some golden age in the past, we take what is real and bring the paradise back, or just reestablish a real paradise, which is like a third reality. You had the original paradise reality, you had the second fallen reality, and then you've got a third, like
Well,
heavenly
I
Jerusalem.
had an interesting idea that if the Matrix is at the top level because it's running on top of the real world, quote unquote, but you could do the same trick that Nolan does in Inception, where you can go down further levels, and if you can make it clear that you're not entering a new simulation on top of reality, but you're actually going a level deeper, perhaps you could say there's the real world that you begin in, there's the middle world, which you spend most of the story thinking is the real world, and then the actual breakthrough at the end of the story is to liberate yourself from the middle world and enter the real world. But in a way, you don't even have to show the real world. You could end the story in this ambiguous way where you kind of imply that maybe the character is in a way dragged from reality into the middle world. They kind of feel like they should go, and then they think they shouldn't. They bottle it, but then through happenstance, they end up exiting the Matrix into the middle world. But then their decision in the third act is deliberately to go out of the middle world into the base reality, but you then use the advantage of the medium to paint very broad strokes about what the protagonist discovers at the end, and leave it really like interesting and surreal and ambiguous, but to basically suggest that is that is the right choice.
It's like the Gospel of Mark. if you believe that it ends after the first half of chapter 16, where it just ends with, because they were all afraid. They didn't tell anyone anything because they were all afraid. Like,
Cut to black.
so what are you gonna do with? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, strong ending.
I returned.
Quite interesting. Hi, this is kind of the wrap up. Last thoughts, last ideas, last chance to throw stuff in. Probably what I will do after this is write up a proposed, or maybe a couple of proposed story structures, and I'll reconvene a panel at some other occasion, and we can chew over some more specific ideas.
I have a nerdy little detail from the gospel that you might be able to use. Do you remember when Paul's talking about love's dimensions?
You mean in Corinthians?
I think so.
Like,
do you remember his?
Love is not jealous.
No, like
kind.
Like length and width of love.
Oh, is that the
how
end of
great.
Romans 8?
Yeah. Does someone want to read it?
I'm not convinced I've got the right place, but shall I find Romans 8? It's like the I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord.
I think I might have been thinking Ephesians 3:20 actually.
Okay. Go on.
I'm looking for it. Start putting up so many ads on Bible websites.
I thought neither height nor depth nor anything else would be able to separate us from the love of God. It was pretty good.
That's
pull
close.
for dimensions of love.
Well, there's another one that's funny. It's like Paul goes like neither the height nor depth nor length nor width, right?
In Romans 11, there's one about the knowledge of God. So, oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable
No,
his
it's-
judgments below earth.
It's Ephesians 3:18. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
So does someone want to read that? I'm gonna be one of the sly dogs about it.
Give me a second. Ephesians 3:18. So it says, I pray that out of the glorious riches he may strengthen you with the power and spirit, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with the Lord's holy people, to grasp, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ.
Ooh, it's more than 3 dimensions.
Whoa. Which one of them is time?
But
Let's see. High
yeah,
and deep.
yeah.
Maybe wide and long are both measured as complete distances, and high and deep feel like measuring from 0 in both directions.
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know,
it's a funny little thing, like you're mentioning Inceptions about like depths of like matrices, but there's also I have my fun little thought that I got from I got this thought from a few different Protestant pastors when I was Protestant, which I don't know if Philip knows I stopped being Protestant. Uh,
No,
yeah, I
you've
prefer.
gone to the Matrix.
Yeah, no, but
Maybe that should be the real message.
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
The
I like it. I
Matrix.
like.
Is the Catholic Church.
I mean, that's what they think.
But um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
interesting to think. Um, yeah, well, I've heard from different Protestant pastors, and I'm trying to see if there's any historicity to this. But like, if you're God and you're outside of time, then maybe when Jesus opens up at the Transfiguration and shows Moses, that's like actually Moses on the hill in the past. I always found that a
Yeah.
cute little idea.
Yeah, I also enjoy that. So the idea is that Moses goes up and kind of time travels, and then when he comes back down, he just is like chooses not to record any of the details about future technology.
Well,
Whatever
he
else.
did age.
So-
He did age. He in fact aged and got gray hair when he came down. So who knows? But no, it's a funny thought that like if God's outside of time, then like he can go backwards if he wants. He can intersect different parts if he wants. It doesn't matter to him. There's something wrong. I feel like there's something inherently wrong to say God is bound by time, but whether or not he exists in like the absence of time, because like time is a creation, and he's outside of his creation or above his creation, so he's not bound by his creation. He's outside of the framework of time and space, which is wild to think about. But like you can almost think about like the idea that a Christian story of either science fiction or fantasy would have to incorporate this idea that time by being something that's created is not the like structure that encapsulates God. God is above and outside of that too. And so he can the scriptures say like 1,000 years about a day and a day about 1,000 years. That's true in the sense that he can unwrap time and see it all, and he can like crisscross different wires and connections in different ways he wants. That sometimes whenever I'm reading like an old book that's very rarely read by anyone, I'm always thinking in the back of my head, but when God created this man to write this book, he also foresaw
Did
me
he
reading
know
it.
I would read it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's centuries or thousands of years of difference there, but God would know and see and design the fact that there would be a connection there, even though it's a very private connection between me and the author who's been dead for thousands of years. And I think that there's an intimacy to that, and I do draw a connection to like the communion of the saints with that, whereby like when the saints die and go to and are in heaven, they can see maybe how God's talents that he gave them connect across time and see it. And that is a kind of different matrix in and of itself, where like you are connected to the saints across time, and that connection kind of exists outside of time, because only God can see the years and decades and centuries and thousands of years that connect the shared wisdom from the Holy Spirit as it trickles throughout the ages. And God might choose one or a few to be the access points that information comes into the world, but it flows out not only in space but from the person that writes, but also across time to the readers that exist beyond that. There's actually I mentioned a few times I really like the Ethiopian church because they have a couple of extra books that I really like the poetry in them. And then there's this one line in Enoch where it's like it's talking about the end times, but it was like written before Christ, and so the prefect the introduction of that passage goes, I don't write this for you when I'm writing this. I'm writing this for a future generation that hasn't come yet. I think that shows up in Isaiah too, where like different writers will make a note. This is for a generation to come that's not here yet. He's like leaving an archive to be found in the future.
Are you picking your denomination based on which will let you have the most books?
No, no, no. I like tradition, so I went back to the church that I was born in, like Catholic.
Fair.
But I still like reading Luther as a historic figure, because I do find
He's
his
thrown you a bone there.
No, like
Be nice.
he was yeah he was a
That's
he
like when
was
you quoted
also
Calvin earlier.
Yeah.
but, you know I read Plutarch because I like his perspectives on why paganism was failing in his age. It's kind of like a testimony to the victory of Christ. He may not know Christ, and he may not know why the oracles of Greece are failing. But when Plutarch wrote this book called De Defunctis Oracles, like on the defunction of oracles, and he's trying to speculate. Like he gathers a bunch of men and holds a public debate. Why are the oracles not working anymore? What's happened to the gods? And he's totally unaware of the fact that like 60 years before that, Jesus had died on the cross and risen from the dead, and the devils had lost their power in the world. He's completely ignorant of this reality. And so when he's writing this, like, hey, we've noticed the last couple of decades the oracles have ceased. He's completely ignorant of the fact that that's because the demonic powers of the world have rescinded. But I'm aware, and so I can make that connection. And so, like, I can read Plutarch, this pagan writer, as a testimony to my faith's triumph, even though he's completely ignorant of that. And I find that fascinating. There's a connection, a matrix, and a dimension there that transcends time and even knowledge and maybe salvation. I don't know if he would, I don't know what his status was when he died, but like these ignorant men who are writing, hey, all of our like pagan demonic rituals are no longer working. Why is that? I know why.
Interesting.
I think we have a butt for our whatever.
But I just want to throw one more question out before we finish the stream. Does anyone have any suggestions for an equivalent for the pills? Because that's such a big
Communion.
I need a mechanism for. I like the
pizza
I
idea.
like that scene so much. Well, pizza idea is one. That's what we've got. So at the minute, if you missed this, Sleep Templar, the only idea we've got so far is you're eating a slice of pizza, and whether it's got pineapple on or not determines whether or not you wake up. What other options do we have for that scene? I don't think we should just have eating a different thing.
Does this story exist as like
the taking of pills has a definite sort of drug psychedelics overlay. It's a bit of a hippie, or if you take psilocybin mushrooms, then you'll discover the true reality of nature. And I'm not so keen on that. It's quite a fun idea, but is there a different way we can approach that?
Is this story like fantasy, sci-fi? Does it exist in our reality, or is it like a different reality?
Good question. I'm open to all ideas right now. So,
have you ever played the Dishonored series?
I haven't played it. I know it, but yeah.
There's this interesting idea that they play with on that, where, in that series there's reality, and then there's something called the void, which is like reality across time, but like existing all in the same space. And the void is like this like mysterious like realm. It's like a spirit world basically, but it transcends time. And so there's like the scientists of the world don't know how to get to it, and they don't even know if it's real. But like they have a lot of like people that claim it exists and like have acquired power from it. And it turns out that the void has this like demigod being who represents like a point of origin for the void, and different beings fill this point of origin kind of in and out and throughout the ages. So like they're all transfixed on that point of origin in the void, but in reality, in our reality, they like exist at different time periods. It's kind of a weird like transfixion there, but because these beings that like hit the intersection point are at the point of origin of the void itself, they can choose to poke into reality and create another like kind of like a pinch like they are. And the idea is that like when the void is pinched like that around like objects or like talisman or something like that, that can be given to someone else and like kind of lend the power of that nexus to that person. It's a bunch of like gobbledygook to give a justification for a magic system in the game, but essentially like the way in which these nexus points are created are through forms of animal and human sacrifice, and the collapsing of a person's timeline into a point orients it to that origin and allows you to extract magic from it. So like in the game takes place in the Industrial Revolution, and so like that world's Industrial Revolution. So whaling is a very big business in the game setting, and some of the magicians of the world have discovered that if they treat the whale as like a sacrifice, they can take the whales like whales live for a very long time, and so this like century length of time collapsed to a point of origin of a talisman made of their bones allows them to get a significant amount of power in their lifetime. If that makes sense. Like you take 100 years of a whale, collapse it to a point, 30 years of using as a human being creates like a significant power area.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of gobbledygook.
Mike
like,
Mironov
yeah.
says taking conscious and irreversible action is a key. It can be as simple as stepping through the door.
Yeah.
So he's saying one of the aspects of this mechanic, whatever we choose it to be, is that it has to be conscious and it has to be irreversible. And stepping through a door is one suggestion. So we've got stepping through a door, we've got eating pizza, and we've got the sacrifice of animals. Philippocrat, what do you have?
When did sacrifice of animals come?
I said that.
Oh, sorry.
The whales.
Okay, yeah, okay. But another one that's actually come up is literature. Like if you read, then suddenly, if you read something that you weren't supposed to, and you're like, huh? Or if you see something that you weren't supposed to see, then
should be making a list of these.
Yeah, it's like a medium through which communication can take place, through which the door is unlocked in a sense. So something was hidden, but you have been exposed to it, and the question is, how are you exposed to information? Either you unlock the fourth dimension in your brain by doing mushrooms, or you just walk through a door, look through a window, see a recording of something, read
That's
something.
actually because the Hebrew letter dalet derives from the hieroglyph of a door.
Yeah.
And this is a very ancient understanding of how one receives a blessing. You enter through like door has multiple meanings, and in that culture it also implied like the entrance of a tent. So this is why when Noah's giving his blessings and curses to his sons, he mentions that like, you know, if you Japheth go through the tents of Shem, you'll receive a blessing. It's a way of saying like Shem's tents are essentially that era's churches, and submitting to the holiness of that tent will imbue you with the holiness of a blessing of sorts. That could be an idea where like your world might have like old priests that live in tents somewhere, and by submitting to the tent, you might receive the generational blessing that tent carries by whatever patriarch is in there. That's a very old Levantine understanding that still exists in some Yazidi and Chaldean communities.
So to add, the other one was literature. I don't know if you wanted to write that one down, but that was just one.
Sorry,
and then there was also a picture of Dorian Gray art in that story, so, where the artwork contains all of the evil things that he's done, and he tries to kind of ignore the fact that he is actually at heart an evil man, and all of the evil is laid onto this portrait of him that he's got hidden away. And then at some point, I don't know if this is a spoiler, so just a spoiler warning for it's a really old piece of literature. So he stabs the picture, and then there's an exchange that takes place where the picture then takes on all the beauty of innocence again, and his corpse looks like this evil man or something like that. So there's also art as a doorway.
That's also done in Dishonored. I love that idea, by the way. Like the idea that art is its own magic. I love that idea.
I like that. I was going back and forth on this. So I mentioned earlier in the stream, I wanted this debate to be more than just one scene. That it's kind of it comes back and back and back as a question. But I also don't want to lose there's a nature of the film where everything is always driving. Everything has to happen immediately. Everything happens like suddenly. There's no like, well, in 2 months we need to whatever. So I don't know how we have both. I mean, you could have I don't know how much longer this will last. Some kind of you've not got many chances at this. This might be your, and eventually it comes down to last chance, and that's when the protagonist actually, or the protagonists actually do go through. But yeah, so I don't want it to be just, oh, you can wait around forever. I also like that if taking the pill, in a sense, you get the feeling with all of the raves and so on that the Wachowskis actually, in real life, would endorse taking psychedelic drugs at a rave, as like, this is genuinely mind expanding. Perhaps we want to have a mechanism for getting out of the matrix, which is equivalent to like go to church, you know, or
Something sobering.
Take religion seriously. It's kind of go the opposite direction, where it's kind of a wholesome rite of passage.
Yeah, I don't know if a relationship could play a similar role. Like a marriage takes place, then you're locked in. But up to the point of the marriage, I don't know if that's too long.
It's interesting. Yeah,
But yeah,
we don't want it to become too like staid, and there's a tendency that you have crazy, wacky, fun stuff, and then you have the trads doing like planting potatoes. So I don't want to. I don't want to lose some part of the appeal of the Matrix is that it's a kind of, you know, over the top, ridiculous. You know, they're literally, you know, they're not just dodging a bullet, but they're leaning back so far that their head almost touches the ground. Everything's exaggerated. So I don't know. I mean, the baptism thing is interesting. So like going under the water, but maybe you have to swim through a really like long underground passageway that would actually be quite intense to do in real life.
or you can switch the reflection on the water, and then you go into a different. Like you turn off the reflection, the reflection of the water, and then you end up in a different reality. I don't know if that.
Well, there might be there might be a way to play with the elements, like not to play off of Avatar. Actually, this is something I'm sad Avatar never did itself, but Matrix actually did it with, like, you know, the reflection in the mirror is how you get out. There's the side, you know, in Avatar, the Last Airbender, you get like the different control over different elements, but they never really played with the spiritual aspects of those elements and how you might be able to like translate yourself through them. In the scriptures, there are elements of this. There's like baptism by water, whereby you lose the old Adam and come out with the new Adam. There's also the fire, but like the baptism by fire, which is like it's more like painful. I don't really know for sure about what fire baptism means, but it seems to do the same as regular baptism, but with pain. But I wonder if you could like take something like the elemental forces of nature, and each having a different way that refracts the human existence and collapses it back into a transformed being. Water would be, you know, water would remove your uncleanliness or allow you to see what's unclean about you. And then when you come out of the baptism waters, you would like have a greater understanding of how you poison the earth or something. the fire would be like, what about your consciousness or what about your existence is deserving of wrath? And then when you come back out of the fire, you can more greatly understand your like your energetic evil versus your uncleanliness in water. Earth might be like you go through the cave or something and you find the knowledge and you come out with a great understanding of what knowledge is in you that's false, kind of like Plato's cave. And maybe wind might be something like what about you is lost in the wind, right? What have you been holding on to that's just wind? It's nothing. It's just air. Let it go. These might be different ways to transform the character. Like each one could be its own kind of baptism. You don't have to have a single thing that like the single thing will like transform your character. It can be actually more like different parts of your character are transformed by these forces, and you have to go through these different trials to become a more perfect human.
What if so we were talking about the ticking clock, perhaps. So let's suppose the mechanism for getting through to the other realm is you have to walk through fire, something that obviously you would be afraid to do. So maybe the protagonist doesn't do it a couple of times, but every time they chicken out, something terrible happens in the real world, and in some way that is like the underlying reality leaking through into the simulation. And so rule of three, first two times the protagonist knows that they ought to, don't, and something bad happens. Third time the character does it or falls through or whatever, and then learns, like, one of the things they discover is a parallelism where things in the underlying reality like caused the terrible tragic events in the Matrix, so that if they had delayed longer, that it would have continued to, that they're delaying, they need to then feel bad about it. Lots of possibilities here. Another question that needs to be discussed is whether this story will be a comedy or a tragedy in the ancient Greek sense. Yes, that's true. That is something that needs to be discussed. Well, maybe not decided and discussed right now, but
well, it's for Lambstar, right? So,
well, maybe I should. Yes, maybe I should leave the ending ambiguous on these streams, because otherwise none of you will tune in to watch the real thing. I do need, by the way, I need both people to contribute their ideas now, but I will need to cast this thing eventually. So if you're listening to this and you or someone you know is a budding actor, then get in touch. Fire in the childhood house, and the hero has to go in. I also like the idea that there is something really distinctive about the moment that the opportunity to switch realms comes up. So something like a feeling like deja vu. The mirror stuff is cool. So maybe you look in a mirror and you see something that's not reversed, or you see that your reflection is not. Maybe your reflection is beckoning at you or something. Some
it's
really
also
weird, effect.
It's another Alice in Wonderland reference as well, potentially, through the looking glass.
Through the looking glass, yeah. I'll put that down. I think I mentioned mirror already, did I?
Yes,
Mirror.
yeah.
What was the other one I mentioned? Deja vu.
What if earlier we were talking about how the AI wouldn't be capable of running the whole thing, so they have the bugs and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is set in a kind of mythical world, what if there's examples where just absurd things happen, like out of the blue? So let's just say like a dragon appears for like, but you're the only person that sees it in the field, and then it
Ah.
disappears, just like once or a couple of times. And maybe there's others who are there to police, like censor those who have these sightings or make them out to be whack jobs, etc., etc.
I think you're right. It's a real missed opportunity if we don't use the opening act to do a few real surrealist, crazy things.
So, but
It's
that
just
would
as a
also,
mystery, like what's going on.
but then also that kind of would naturally point somebody to ask more questions, and it gets that kind of opening of, okay, why, there's a problem with the very software itself, you might say, or with the simulation itself, which points towards that mythical reality you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I think we do need to figure out, is this like the waking up? Is it that in the real world you have some kind, like your brain is plugged in, or you're wearing a suit, or you've got some, are you in some way being plugged into a machine that is hijacking your senses, and is that machine some kind of a computer? So that's the more sci-fi direction. Or is it like dreams or a spiritual realm?
Well, one could frame it in terms of like deities, and then some deities have maybe forgotten oversight of a certain area, and then something weird happens there because they're not doing their job, and that, so that would be a more supernatural kind of an approach.
Yeah.
But
I guess it's ultimately, do we choose to reveal at some point that it is hard sci-fi or not? I mean, you could always speculate that there's a hard sci-fi explanation, but it is a genre choice, and I think it quite significantly changes how you feel about the story, one way or the other.
I had
I think the worst outcome would be, the worst choice would be that it looks like fantasy until do a reverse C.S. Lewis, where it turns out to be hard sci-fi in the third act, which is the kind of thing you would do if you were a sort of cynical atheist, because it's like, okay, it's understandable why you had these primitive supernatural beliefs until modern science was invented, and now you can drop all of that. So I don't think we probably want to do that.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to dip out, but thanks for having me. And
well, we're about to hit 3 hours, so head off, Nathan. Thank you for having me.
All right.
But maybe we will all wrap up here. Any last thoughts, either of you, Philip? Cringe-Walker? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, way back when I watched The Matrix for the first time, I tried to figure out something more interesting than batteries as a reason. And I came up with the idea that suppose God wanted to lock away a devil in a way that he couldn't escape. Not in the chained version, but let's say like some kind of like mental seal or mental trap in which the devil, this demon, would not be able to figure out a way out. It would have to be a kind of like riddle or something that would ensnarl the demon's mind in such a way that the demonic mind cannot escape from it. Saint Moses the Black, the Ethiopian, he had an idea, or the Egyptian rather, I forget, he was a black Egyptian. He had the idea that like, no matter how much you fast, Satan doesn't even eat. No matter how much you do works, Satan doesn't even like need to. Like, what's the thing that you can outcompete Satan in? He speculated it was humility. Satan refuses humility, but humanity can be greatly humble. And so, if you wanted to like create a humbling riddle of some kind, what other way would there be for that demonic figure to get out other than to attempt to get a human brain to rationalize it for him? If it's something that's beyond his comprehension, that devil needs something that can comprehend it to figure it out for him. And this is kind of like an ancient idea of how spirits were locked away in certain areas and only a human could free them because the means by which they were locked away were beyond the comprehension of the locked away spirit. Examples of that might include like in Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah or somewhere where like there's a devil that's locked away under the earth in chains and can't come out until a figure at the end of time releases them or something. But like if you want a reason to keep humans in a dream world or in a matrix system, it might be to solve a riddle or solve a question, an impossible question for the demonic mind to figure out. Well, the machine, or something like a machine mind couldn't figure out without human brains, like something that only a human could think about. Maybe it is like beauty or truth or creativity or something that an AI brain, an AI brain specializes in knowledge, but not necessarily creativity. Even AI art fundamentally relies on existing art. It can't actually generate new art. So maybe like the AI needs to have like millions of human brains working together to create some ideal structure or ideal art that it cannot comprehend, and that perfection might release it somehow. I don't know, or do something for it in some way. Maybe it's not about imprisonment, but something that like the thing which is holding humanity captive cannot get itself captive, uncaptivated by something, right? Like it's put humanity in this prison because it is also in its a prison of its own.
Yeah. Any last thoughts, Philip?
Nope. I think yeah.
Let's call it there since we've gone over 3 hours. Thanks very much both for being here. And once again, I'd be keen for anybody watching this on the playback to remember to stick comments below with ideas. And yeah, I guess in maybe a couple of weeks, I'll put together a stream and hopefully report back with some more concrete. I'll put together 3 options, and we can pick one or put the ideas together into a single final version that I can then go and completely write. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and good night.